today to talk about The Stairway to Heaven, Book 2 of the Earth Chronicles by Zecharia Sitchin. And let me start by pointing out the simple fact that it does a lot better to read his books than Eric von Däniken, in the respect that he is consistent. Yeah, I don't agree with all his conclusions. Some of them ignore psychology or spirituality, but, I mean spirituality in terms of actual spiritual beings. But, he generally, he sticks to his conclusions. It's not like the Ancient Aliens series where the same facts are going to be brought up later in the year or the next year with a different conclusion. He does try to figure out the place of heaven on earth. Is it, is it in up in Turkey, closer to Mount Ararat? Is it somewhere in Egypt, or is it under the Kaaba at Mecca? Did they build the Kaaba over over some sort of alien spacecraft that they have buried there, or is it over in Persia? It follows different, but he's following the path of this, and he's kind of doing this. You do have mention of journeys to heaven. Now, the details of some of these are changed to make it sound like being beamed up by a spacecraft, this prophet or this individual. But it's like one interesting thing you see is the journey of Enoch, and the second heaven is the gloomy heaven. So it's sort of a different, before he gets to the third heaven. And there's a theory that you see elsewhere of, okay, the tree of life, is the tree of life, is it the Pleiades? Because some of the drawings actually kind of match the Pleiades. Is it Draco? Is it one of the other cross constellations? Some of the mythology actually does point in that direction. And he is right in the respect that there is a lot of technology that is enclosed in there, and I don't think it's all guessing. And there's some universality of themes such as pyramids, and and why is the Great Pyramid, why is that more the model rather than sort of the progression, the Djoser Pyramid and the Bent Pyramid and stuff like this? Why do pretty much every pyramid in Egypt and along the Nile work like that? And the Great Pyramid does appear to be the oldest for multiple reasons, but I believe, the evidence seems to point that there's multiple layers to the pyramid, the outer layer being the oldest. And there's actually an inscription in the middle of the pyramid, towards the entry of the pyramid or something like that, the Great Pyramid, that has this diagram that people say relates to the soul doctrine of the Egyptians, of the multi-part of the soul, the Ba, the Ka, and stuff, and then you die, and then that's it, and you're reintegrated. I forget exactly how it goes, but if you look at it and you think of the soul doctrine, it makes sense. And speaking of Egypt, I guess, I've bought the original Magical Egypt series. I saw advertised on I don't know, I think there was a History Channel or something advertisement. I thought, yeah, and it's a very good series. And I'm watching the second series, and it goes after the issue of alternative history. They both go after the issue of alternative history and information being encoded in the art, that the Egyptians didn't really do art for art's sake. They were, talking about spiritual, psychic, physical sorts of things, and they were putting that information into art, sometimes in a way that we can't necessarily understand on our first glance. But so that's And one of the things that we do need to talk about in this book is the issue of the hero's journey. And of course it brings up, there's a couple chapters that bring up Gilgamesh, because of course Sumerian mythology is a recurring issue for the for Zecharia Sitchin and other, well, particularly Zecharia Sitchin, which the guy, it's like, okay, the hero's journey, because, okay, to contact these aliens, I think they're not necessarily physical beings, but that you had to be at certain places and you had to do certain things, but there are details that make it impossible for a living being taking a spacecraft. Oh, she's hanging out the spacecraft, the thing's open and they're reaching out. You know, it just doesn't make sense. There are things that, oh, that could be it if it wasn't for these. So I think there's not only psychological truths that we can get to, but there's universal teachers. I do believe there are spiritual beings that talk to us, whether God's sending prophets or there's a bunch of, or the ones that we call devils, whether they're good or bad now, that's left to be said, but I do believe they communicate information to people, and that's sort of the universality. And but this hero journey of Gilgamesh, what is that all about? Oh, it does make sense, some of the aspects in terms of his development and stuff, but I mean, it's an interesting stage of the hero journey that is kind of ignored in the, you know, prophet of God religions, the fully polytheistic religions and fully henotheistic religions kind of have, you know, you have these drunken heroes and stuff like this. So his hero journey, he gets drunk and he gets into fights and hires prostitutes, and I don't know how that was necessary for his development. Maybe pride before a fall or something, but and of course, one of the most ridiculous things that, yeah, this is what I was talking about, this, you know, that could be the Pleiades. Of course, he gets back to this 12th planet, but he follows these angles, which is very interesting, that such and such site is connected to such and such site, and they're always, but the different purposes, different spiritual purposes for their cults, not this is mission control, this is a spaceport, this is a sighting spot for the thing. But the ancients did connect this area and this area and this area and put it in the myth that this was, yeah, it's completely fascinating stuff. He's better sourced than others. Yeah, if you're looking for like some of these female figures and stuff like this, the ancient, the Magical Egypt series, it brings up brain structures and stuff like this, which is very interesting. I didn't even think of this, but you look at the drawings and they're like that. E.H. Palmer is brought up in this series, and I sung that Quran translation that he did, but very influential figure in Egyptology, apparently. And speaking of Egyptology, there's a very convincing case that that Zecharia Sitchin makes in terms of Vyas and Hill, Vyse and Hill, forging a name in the pyramid. But now it turns out there's 5 names of the pyramids. There's all sorts of tourists, since the Greeks and the Romans, and now, and more recently the British and stuff, that they put their name in the pyramid too. So it does seem that the pyramids weren't burial chambers, at least not the Great Pyramids. The Nubian pyramids were like, weren't they grave markers? There's a lot of pyramids in Egypt, but he does very well reason out that argument of that one inscription being forged. Graham Hancock, what's the name of the book? Supernatural. He says other stuff too. He talks about the actual angle of the, you know, that you trip at, the 3, 4, 5. I think that's 3, 4, 5. The Pythagorean triangle. Yeah, that's some, you know. So there's, again, it's about mystical technology, but there's building technology too. But of course, like before I said, he's trying to turn things into rocket ships, and you can't draw a tree. A tree, people. Come on, a tree. It's really supposed to be a rocket ship. Just because they drew it stylized. And, okay, where's the Mountain of Moses? But it's like, yeah, he's trying to claim that they're supposed to be rocket ships and stuff like that. So, and of course the mystery of the Sphinx, and there's Egyptian legends about the Sphinx. I saw this program, this guy is like the historian, and it goes back so far, and they actually have far more carvings of the Sphinx in the oral history of Egypt than they do, and I mean, who was the real maker of the Great Pyramid, and it couldn't possibly been who they thought it was, because, you know, his successor was marked his name in a lower date, and I'm rambling on, but and I mean, these guys, there was a difference. There was a difference between the actions of the people who set up the cults, whether they didn't know that these beings they encountered weren't gods or whatever, and the actions ascribed to these entities themselves. But so that is my point for the meantime. And I hope I did better with this one than the last, but I will, in the future, continue to bring up issues about the meaning. It might, like the Goetia sort of thing. They're not just pieces of technology. Each of these symbols has meaning, and in my writings about these ones, I have talked more about this. But art, whether it's visual or whatever, there's something more than the immediate level, and maybe I'll do a specific video about that in the future, but I'd like to address that for my most recent comment on the channel.